Alan W. Watts was a writer, philosopher and lecturer. Born in 1915 in England, he died in California in 1973. Anyone interested in Alan Watts' thoughts is spoiled for choice when it comes to sources of information. There are currently over 75 printed works attributed to Alan Watts. These works are in addition to the hundreds of conferences, television and radio programs and articles of which Alan Watts was the author. Despite the availability of a quantity of audio-visual documents illustrating Watts's ideas, books remain a privileged means to understand his thoughts, better than listening to a conference or a TV show. Isolating oneself to immerse in a book and intensely study the ideas of Alan Watts is a more enriching experience than any others. However, even if one chooses books as the preferred medium for learning the philosophy of Alan Watts, a problem remains, that of the choice of works to consult, because their number remains impressive. During his lifetime, between 1932 and 1973, Alan Watts published 35 works in about 40 years. The first work written by Alan Watts was the booklet, an outline of Zen, which he wrote at the age of 17. His first book, The Spirit of Zen, appeared in its first edition in 1936, when Alan Watts was only 21 years old. 37 years later, in 1973, Watts wrote his last book titled, Tao, The Watercourse Way, a work that appeared in 1975, 2 years after he died. After his death, between 1974 and 2021, more than 40 books were published under his name, these books being mostly adaptations of his articles and lectures. Although the most interesting Alan Watts's books are those he wrote during his lifetime, a few books published after his death represent his thoughts and deserve to be considered among his best works. This video will present you to the list of the 10 most popular works by Alan Watts. This top 10 of Alan Watts's books have been established according to the volume of their sales. However, there is an Alan Watts book that does not appear among this top 10 and that is impossible not to mention among his best works for the good reason that Watts himself has designated it as the best book he has written. This book arrives just a little outside the top 10 list. This book is Nature, Man, and Woman, published in 1958. In this book, Watts addresses the question of love and knowledge, two inseparable concepts, according to him, since one can only love well what one knows well, and since when one really knows someone or something, he can only love it. So, while not in Alan Watts's top 10 best-selling books, Nature, Man, and Woman should be on the to-read list of those who want to fully understand his thoughts. That being said, here are the top 10 books written by Alan Watts. Number 10. The Joyous Cosmology, Adventures in the Chemistry of Consciousness, published in 1962. With this book, Alan Watts explores how drugs can contribute to one's spiritual journey, when accompanied with sustained philosophical reflection by a person who is in search, not of kicks, but of understanding. In ninth position, a book published after Alan Watts' death and only in 2017, Out of Your Mind, Tricksters, Interdependence, and the Cosmic Game of Hide and Seek. The book Out of Your Mind is actually the transcription of 6 historic lectures from Alan Watts and was first published as an audiobook. Number 8. Tao, The Watercourse Way, published in 1975. This is the very last book written by Alan Watts before he died, and which was completed by Taoist author Al-Chung Liang Huang. Number 7. The Meaning of Happiness, The Quest for Freedom of the Spirit in Modern Psychology and the Wisdom of the East. One of the oldest bestsellers from Alan Watts, a book written in 1940 at the beginning of World War II. Number 6. There Is Never Anything But the Present, and Other Inspiring Words of Wisdom, published in 2021. This is one of the most recent books attributed to Watts. Far from being an in-depth reading, this book is a collection of small quotations and wisdom formulas. Number 5. In My Own Way, an Autobiography, 1915 to 1965. This book that Alan Watts written about himself covers his first 50 years of life. Watts published this book only in 1972, 7 years after the end of the 50-year period considered in his autobiography and just 1 year before he died. Number 4. Become What You Are. This small book published in 1955 is a collection of earlier articles from Watts, many of them dating from the 30s. Number 3. The book, On the Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are. published in 1966. This book addresses the problem of personal identity and, by exposing Hinduism to Occidental readers, help us understand that the self is actually the root and ground of the universe. Number 2. The Wisdom of Insecurity, A Message for an Age of Anxiety. This book was published in 1951, a time that what's considered an age of anxiety, perhaps that, 70 years later, are we still living under the same age? Watts's message in this book is that the cause of much of our anxiety and frustration is our inability to live in the present moment. According to Watts, if to enjoy even an enjoyable present we must have the assurance of a happy future, we are crying for the moon. This 1951 book was one of Watts' first bestsellers and preceded by 6 years the publication in 1957 of his #1 book, The Way of Zen. With this book, Alan Watts wrote the first Buddhist bestseller ever, and became the pioneers of the introduction of Buddhism to the Western civilization. 12 years after the war, at the moment when young children from the 40s were becoming adults, Watts, by exposing Zen to college students, furnished to this young audience an alternate view of life. This thinking had a lot of influence both at the end of the 50s, during the last years of the Beat generation, and into the 60s with the hippie movement. Even in the 21st century, this book can infuse some spiritual life in a materialistic society, more than just an exposition of an Eastern philosophy. The Way of Zen is a personal transformation guide and is a must-read for anyone interested to truly experience Alan Watts's teachings.